late June, the 100th Tour de France kicked off in Corsica on its epic 2,000-mile journey. And I noticed something. Got any guesses? It's all dudes! For that reason, the most famous cycling race in the world will kick off my list of the 10 sporting events where you are least likely to see a woman compete. So put on your gender and equity referee uniforms and come along. So first up we have, as I mentioned, Le Tour de France. Now, there used to be the Tour de France Féminine, later changed to the Grand Boussole, pardon my terrible French pronunciation, which were the women's equivalents of the Tour de France. They didn't go the exact same route as the Tour de France. They weren't quite as long because the UCI, which is the international governing body of professional cycling, does not even allow women cyclists to ride for as long distances as it does for male cyclists. Apparently, if we pedal too far, our uteruses might fall off. In the 80s and 90s though, the Tour de France Féminine was a pretty close equivalent to the Tour de France, but then the Tour de France actually sued the Tour de France Féminine for trademark infringement, which totally undercut sponsorship dollars, leaving the race with very little funding, which is one reason why it piddled out for good in 2009. Next up on our list, let's go to a more obvious major sporting event where you're not going to see any women, and that is the World Series of Baseball here in the United States. And folks, don't get me wrong, I love baseball. I am a fan of the Atlanta Braves. There is no female equivalent to women's professional baseball. Now, from 1999 to 2004, there was something called the Women's World Series, which took place among a few teams, most notably from the US and Japan, but it's nowhere near as popular, obviously, as the Men's World Series of Baseball, and it was a pretty short-lived thing. Women's professional baseball, though, is probably never gonna happen because people say time and time again, you have an equivalent, and it's called softball, even though those are two completely different games. Next up, we have probably the most obvious on our list, which is the Super Bowl, which for me is a night dedicated to the eating of snacks. So for that, I enjoy it. But when it comes to women's participation, the Super Bowl gets big ol' thumbs down because there is no such thing as the women's NFL. In 1999, there was something started up called the Women's Professional Football League, and it had two teams, the Michigan Minks and the Minnesota Vixens. Come on. And I'm gonna start up a team called the Houston Harlots, San Diego Sluts, the Detroit D-Cups. The Vixens are gonna be taken really seriously. Although I will say, speaking of being taken seriously, you know the one aspect of women's professional football that is being taken seriously money-wise? The Lingerie League. Slow clap for the world being terrible sometimes. Now put on your ice skates for the next one because we're talking about the Stanley Cup. Now the New York Times does report that the Canadian Women's Hockey League, which is about 6 years old, is the closest equivalent to a pro league for ladies who want to play hockey. But get this, it's a nonprofit organization and the players don't even get paid. Fun fact though, there are 12 women's names engraved on the Stanley Cup, but of course they're not the names of women players. That'd be crazy. No, those are the names of female team presidents, team owners, and NHL administrators. Let's take a break for a little bit of good news at the Olympics. Olympic women's boxing, which was, up until the 2012 London Games, the very last male-only sport in the Summer Olympics. For a name drop, Clarissa Shields, who is one tough lady, brought home the gold for the US in those inaugural women's boxing events. But just to get an idea of how uncomfortable we have been with women boxing on a pro level, until 1996, Great Britain had a ban on women's pro boxing. And until 1993, USA Boxing had a male-only policy. So at least we have some good news that the Olympics are paving the way for women's boxing to get more recognition on the international stage. Now for number 6, we're switching from the Summer Olympics to the Winter Olympics for the ski jump, because in 2014, women will be allowed in the ski jump for the very first time. So why is it taking so long for women to compete in ski jumping? Well, there have been some weird notions about what the event might do to the female form. In 2005, the then president of the International Ski Federation told an NPR reporter, ski jumping, quote, seems not to be appropriate for ladies from a medical point of view. What does that even mean? If you reach a certain elevation, your boobs explode. The fact that we can fly in airplanes should be baffling to this man. In 2010, women ski jumpers actually did sue to jump in the Vancouver Games, and the case went all the way up to the Canadian Supreme Court. But the Canadian Supreme Court just said, we don't want to hear this case, But thankfully in 2014, finally, women will get to ski jump in the Olympics. It's the little things. And side note though, speaking of gender and the Olympics, while women are now allowed to compete in all of the sports, there are two that remain female only: synchronized swimming and rhythmic gymnastics. Sports discrimination goes both ways. Now next up we have a trio of horse-related events, which is pretty ironic considering the stereotype that all girls are really obsessed with horses. But if they grow up and want to ride that horse on a polo field, well, they might be able to play professionally, but they will not be able to compete in the top tier events, which happen usually in Argentina. Ranked by National Geographic as one of the top 10 athletic events in the world, the Argentine Polo Open Championship is not for women. This event has been happening since 1893, and there has yet to be a woman on a competing team, as far as I could tell. Now, people, if you know any different, let me know. But according to my research, no women on those horses. Let's go over the pond to the Grand National, which is like Great Britain's Kentucky Derby, and female jockeys are rare indeed to find. In 1977, Charlotte Brew became the very first female jockey to ride in the Grand National, and there have only been 8 total who have ever ridden since then. A female jockey has yet to win, but in 2012, Katie Walsh did come in 3rd overall in the Grand National, so male jockeys, watch out because the ladies are galloping up behind you. Now, second to last on our list is the Kentucky Derby, which, kind of like the Grand National, does not bar female jockeys from riding, but female jockeys have simply been a rare breed, even though Rosie Napravnik this year, only a couple months ago, came in 5th overall. So, as with the Grand National, female jockeys are really starting to make a big name for themselves. And I have a feeling that we're gonna see a female jockey win either the Grand National or the Kentucky Derby by 2020. That's my prediction. I'll make a bet, find me in 7 years, and if I didn't win, I'll pay up. Set the terms of the bet in the comments, okay? And finally, number 10 is the Formula One race. And I saved Formula One for last because not only have very few women actually competed in this top tier auto racing event where the cars zoom around the track at up to 220 miles per hour, but because it has been notorious for having a sexist culture. Recently, a guy named Sir Sterling Moss, who made a huge name for himself as a famous Formula One racer, said that women simply don't have the mental capacity to drive in Formula One, and that's why we haven't been doing it. We can't handle speeds and stress, spontaneously have our periods. Sir Sterling Moss definitely has gotten a lot of flack in the press for it and has led some people to publicly come out and say that Formula One does need more women. Basically, Formula One needs its Danica Patricks, plural. So there you have it, the 10 major sporting events where you are least likely to see a woman competing, or that has been traditionally male only, or does not have a female equivalent. Lots of qualifiers in compiling this list, which is why I want to know from you, did I leave any out? Leave them in the comments. Are there any female big name sporting events that men are not allowed to participate in. I want to hear about those as well. Comment, let me know your thoughts. Do you think it even matters? Do you think it's a big deal at all that women, for instance, can't ride in the Tour de France? I think that's kind of crazy. I think that they should let anyone who can bike 2,000 miles ride it if they can compete and get there. I feel like I should end with a sports pun, so hope this video was a home run and not a strikeout.